My name is Vera Caldwell. I'm 62 years old, and for 30 years I worked as a quiet accountant in a small insurance firm north of San Francisco. Numbers were my language, order my comfort. I raised my only son alone after his father died. I thought love, if patient enough, could hold anything together. I was wrong. It began on an ordinary evening, the kind that carries no warning in its air. The sound of a car door outside, then two voices, his and hers, drifting up my porch steps. I was setting the table when Simon walked in, carrying confidence like it was a badge he'd earned. Naomi followed, her hand neatly clasped around his, her perfume arriving before her words. He looked around my kitchen, eyes scanning the room as if it were an inventory. Then, with the same calm I once taught him to balance a checkbook, he said, "Mom, this house should be under our name now." He smiled, but there was something sharp behind it. Naomi nodded, pressing his hand as if to seal the sentence. For a moment, I didn't speak. My hand stayed on the edge of the table, feeling the grain of the old wood his father and I had chosen decades ago. I heard the clock tick, a long second stretching between what I knew of him and what he had just said. Then I smiled. It was the kind of smile that people mistake for agreement, though it means something else entirely. He kept talking about taxes, about simplifying things, about how I shouldn't worry about paperwork at my age. Naomi's eyes flicked between us like a metronome. They both looked so certain, as if the word ours had already replaced mine. I let them. I listened. And when they finally paused, I asked gently, "Is that what you both think should happen?" Naomi squeezed his hand tighter. "It's for your own good," she said. "We'll take care of everything." I nodded, as if the idea had a place to rest in my mind. Then I excused myself to pour more tea, letting the silence grow long enough for them to think they'd won. In the reflection of the kettle, I saw my own face, a calm woman who had just learned that love, when unguarded, can be mistaken for permission. I returned to the table, set the cups down, and smiled again. "We'll talk about it later," I said. They didn't notice that I slipped a small note beneath my planner before I sat down. On it, I wrote only 3 words. "Remember Friday, 6 p.m. I knew what that smile meant. It wasn't surrender. It was a signal, to myself. I was giving them a chance to reveal who they truly were. Before I continue, if you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal left you speechless, stay with me. What happened next isn't loud or cruel. It's quiet, deliberate, and real. Simon and Naomi stayed for dinner. The meal felt like a formality, the kind people perform for politeness, while the real conversation hums underneath. He talked about his job, how stressful it was, how unfair the economy had become. Naomi laughed too brightly, her fingers constantly adjusting the napkin by her plate. I noticed how neither of them once asked how I was doing. When he reached for his glass, I saw a faint tremor in his hand, not from nerves, but from urgency. The kind of urgency that comes from debt. I had seen that shake before, in clients who'd signed one too many loans. Later that night, after they left, I stood by the kitchen window. The street was quiet, the porch light spilling across the walkway where his car had been. My neighbor June's curtains fluttered slightly across the yard. She must have seen them leave. I took a deep breath, opened the drawer by the phone, and found an old receipt, the one from the sneakers I'd bought him years ago for his college graduation. I used to keep it because he once said, "You didn't have to, Mom." That paper meant gratitude then. Now it meant memory. I folded it carefully and placed it under the note marked Friday. For a long time, I stared at that small pile of paper, the proof of a mother's trust and a mother's awakening. The house was silent, but it felt different now, as if every wall had overheard something it would never forget. I looked around the room at the photographs on the mantel, the clock ticking toward midnight. This house had been built from sacrifice, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. It wasn't about property, it was about identity. He thought I'd let it go. I whispered, almost to the air itself, "You'll understand one day, Simon." Then I turned off the light, the house settling into its usual quiet. Only my note remained on the table. 3 words that would soon begin everything that followed. They came to claim what they believed was theirs. But I was about to remind them that love doesn't erase ownership, and silence doesn't mean consent. Friday came with a calm that felt rehearsed. The morning light stretched across my kitchen floor, catching the steam from my coffee cup. I knew they'd return that day, and I knew they would come carrying something heavier than words. I had ironed my blouse, cleaned the table, and opened the curtains wide, every gesture deliberate, every detail prepared. When the knock came, it was sharp, impatient. Simon entered first, holding a stack of papers in a folder the color of ash. Naomi followed, her expression painted in politeness. She placed her handbag neatly on the chair, as if settling in for business. "Mom, these are just some forms to make things easier," he said. "Taxes, property transfers, all that boring stuff. Naomi helped me pull them together." I smiled as I reached for my reading glasses. "That was thoughtful of you." He slid the folder across the table. Inside, the papers were crisp, freshly printed, still smelling faintly of toner. The top sheet bore my name in bold letters. Beneath it, smaller print I could barely see. Naomi leaned forward. "You don't have to go through all of it now. Just sign at the bottom. It's really just a convenience for you." Convenience. Such a gentle word for something that could take a lifetime away. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered above the page. "May I keep these for a few days?" Simon's face tightened. "It's not complicated, Mom. We just want to handle things for you. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and accounts anymore." "I appreciate that," I said softly. "But you know me. I read every number twice." Naomi smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, but this is really just a formality." I began to skim through the fine print, pretending to follow casually, but the words carried a quiet danger. Phrases about authorization, management rights, transfer in the event of incapacity. Words I'd seen before in my years of accounting. Words that meant power-shifting hands. I kept my tone gentle. "Simon, would you mind explaining this line here?" He leaned over. "It's just standard language," he said quickly, then shifted the page. "Nothing to worry about." Naomi reached out, touching my wrist lightly. "Your son just wants to make sure you're safe. You've always been so independent. It's time to let us help." Her voice was honeyed, the kind that's meant to soothe while it seals a door behind you. I nodded, set the pen down, and smiled. "Then I'll read it tonight. I'll sign once I've had a proper look." Simon's jaw moved once, a quiet flicker of frustration. "Fine, but don't overthink it, Mom. It's just paperwork." He gathered his phone, pretending not to care, but his fingers tapped against the table in uneven rhythm. That's what guilt sounds like. Small, restless taps that people think no one notices. As they spoke about dinner plans, I picked up an old receipt lying on the table, a faded one from a grocery store. I slipped it into my pocket absent-mindedly, or so it seemed. Simon didn't notice. That little paper, smudged with ink, would later sit beside the others. Another small proof of how people show their intent without meaning to. When they finally left, the quiet in the house felt alive, like the moment before rain. I sat down again, reread the first page, and this time I didn't skim. The form wasn't a convenience. It was a full transfer of financial authority. No limits, no safeguards. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger. A single signature could erase decades of independence. My phone buzzed. A message from Simon. "Don't forget to sign tonight. Love you." I stared at the words, "Love you." They looked strange, sitting next to what I had just read. Instead of replying, I folded the papers neatly and placed them in my file cabinet, under pending. Then I wrote another note to myself on a small pad by the phone. Call Harlan Monday. Harlan Price had been my late husband's friend before he became mine, a lawyer who understood both law and conscience. I knew he'd see what I saw. Outside, the afternoon sun reached the window pane, warm and unbothered. I wanted to believe they didn't mean harm, that fear had guided them instead of greed. But fear is a dangerous compass. It always points back to control. That evening, I made tea and sat by the window. The scent of jasmine filled the room. Across the yard, June was watering her roses, the hose curling at her feet like a patient snake. She looked up and waved. I smiled back, grateful for her simple steadiness. As the street darkened, I took out my notebook and wrote a short line at the bottom of the page. A signature is a kind of silence. I looked at the folder once more before turning off the lamp. Then I whispered into the empty room, "Not this time." In that moment, I knew the house wasn't the only thing I had to protect. I had to guard the quiet within me, the one thing they couldn't sign away. Friday night arrived heavy with humidity, the kind that makes the air taste of metal. I heard the sound of a car engine before the lights reached my driveway. I didn't rush to the window. I already knew who it was. When the doorbell rang, it wasn't the polite kind. It was a demand. I took my time opening it. Simon stood there, red-faced, breathing through clenched teeth. Naomi hovered behind him, her arms crossed tight against her chest. "Where is everything?" he asked, stepping inside before I invited him. The living room looked different now. A few paintings were gone, the shelves lighter, the old oak chest missing from its usual corner. I had moved a few things into storage earlier that day, things that mattered to me, things that would remind me who I was if this house ever stopped feeling like home. "Where's the silver set? Where's Dad's watch?" he snapped. I looked at him calmly. "Safe." Naomi's voice sliced the silence. "Simon, I told you this would happen. She's hiding things from us." "I'm not hiding," I said quietly. "I'm keeping." He laughed once, the kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. "You think this is a game?" "Mom, you're being ridiculous. You can't just move things around like a thief in your own house." "Then maybe I'm not the one playing thief," I said, still soft. His face reddened further. "You've been reading those papers, haven't you? You're letting other people fill your head with nonsense." I turned toward the kitchen, motioning for them to sit. "Tea." Naomi's voice cracked. "Tea? Are you serious? You're acting like we didn't just find half the house empty." I poured water into the kettle anyway. The whistle started slow, then rose like a warning. When I set the cups down, Simon slapped the table with his hand. "This is selfish, Mom. You don't need all this space. You should be grateful we even offered to help." Grateful. That word again. It used to mean warmth. Now it sounded like a leash. "Simon," I said, "I gave you everything I had. What else is there left to give?" His jaw flexed. "You could start with trust." "Trust," I repeated. "You're right. That's exactly what I'm trying to protect." The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Naomi stood, pacing near the door. "We're done arguing. Sign the papers, Simon." "She's not listening." He didn't move. He looked at me, searching for the woman he thought he could persuade. Maybe he realized, just then, that I was no longer that woman. I'll sign what I understand, I said. And I understand that this house is mine. He scoffed, shaking his head, and stormed toward the hallway. Fine, do what you want. You always do. Naomi followed him out, muttering something about old people and drama. The front door slammed, echoing through the house. For a moment, I stood perfectly still, the sound of the engine fading down the street. My hands were steady, though my heart beat in a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. I wasn't afraid. I was awake. June's light flicked on next door. She must have heard the shouting. I walked to the window and waved gently. She waved back, hesitant but kind, the kind of gesture that says, I see you. You're not alone. I turned off the lights and walked down the hall to my bedroom. On my dresser sat a small wooden box, one my husband had carved years ago. Inside was a locket and an envelope, old, yellowed, bound with a rubber band. The handwriting on it was mine, from another lifetime. I opened it. Inside was a bank stub from 1998, a record of the savings account I had once opened for Simon's college tuition. I had never closed it. Over the years, I'd forgotten it even existed. But now, looking at that faint ink, I saw something new. A path. I placed the envelope beside my note marked Friday, folded the receipt next to it, and whispered, You may have walked out tonight, Simon, but you've already told me what I needed to know. Down the hall, the kettle still hummed on the stove, low and steady, like a reminder that some things keep boiling even after the flame is gone. The night outside was silent again, but not peaceful. It was the silence that comes before an answer, and I knew mine was coming. The next morning, I dressed in quiet purpose. The sky hung low, pale and undecided, as I locked the front door and walked toward my car. The air smelled faintly of rain, the kind that waits for you to be halfway through something important before it falls. The bank sat 2 blocks from the grocery store where I'd once taught Simon how to count change. Inside, the marble floors reflected everything too perfectly. I waited in line, the sound of keyboards tapping around me, until a young teller with a practiced smile called me forward. Good morning, she said. How can I help you today? I'd like to review recent activity on my checking account, I replied, and I'll need records from the past 3 months. Her nails clicked gently against the keys. May I see your ID? I slid my driver's license across the counter. She compared the photo to my face, then nodded. The printer hummed, spitting out pages that smelled faintly of heat and toner. I thanked her and stepped aside to a small desk by the window. The first page looked fine, small transactions, grocery stores, a pharmacy. But halfway down the second page, something snagged. A withdrawal for $1,500. The date was familiar. The branch wasn't. My breath slowed. I hadn't been to that branch in years. Below it was a new entry, home and hearth renovations. A credit line I never opened, balance $4,200. I felt the blood move through my chest in small, deliberate beats. When I returned to the counter, I asked, Could you tell me who authorized this credit account? The teller hesitated. It says it was opened online, with linked verification. Someone used your stored information. Do you live at this address? She pointed to the screen. The address was mine, but the phone number beside it wasn't. Thank you, I said quietly, folding the papers into my bag. You've been very helpful. Outside, the sunlight had sharpened, almost mocking. I sat in my car, pages on my lap, and let the reality sink in. Someone had used my trust like a password. I called Harlan before starting the engine. Vera, he said, his voice warm and steady. I was going to call you. I got your message. I think my son's opened accounts in my name, I said. He brought me papers to sign last week. I didn't. Good, he said quickly. Don't sign anything. Bring everything you have to my office Monday morning. We'll start with a fraud report. Keep all correspondence. And, Vera, don't confront him yet. Let's build this right. I understand, I said, though my voice carried a tremor I hadn't expected. After the call, I sat for a while, letting the stillness hold me. Across the street, a father lifted his daughter into a car seat, her laughter spilling across the parking lot. I remembered Simon at that age. Sticky hands, soft eyes, a boy who used to wait by the window when I came home late from work. I closed my eyes. The ache was not anger. It was recognition. The line between love and loss is thin and almost invisible until you trip over it. When I opened them again, the pages looked less like evidence and more like confession. His, not mine. By afternoon, I was back home. June waved from her porch, her face curious but kind. I waved back, pretending the papers in my hand were groceries. Inside, the house felt smaller, the air heavier. I placed the bank printouts on the kitchen table beside my old notebook and began listing each transaction. Names, dates, amounts. A pattern started to take shape, small but deliberate. Renovation stores, a furniture. Supplier, a series of purchases that painted a picture of a life I hadn't been invited to live. When the phone rang again, I half expected it to be Simon, but it wasn't. Mrs. Caldwell? This is Miles Gray. Harlan gave me your number. I handle private investigations for his clients sometimes. He asked me to reach out. His voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had seen too much and still believed in good endings. I think my son's in trouble, I said. Maybe, he replied. But first, we'll find out the truth. He asked me to scan and send the bank pages, then added, if you have anything that feels off, receipts, envelopes, anything, keep them together. Sometimes the smallest things tell the biggest stories. I glanced at the small envelope from the night before. I already have something. Then we're ahead, he said. I'll be in touch Monday after Harlan's meeting. When we hung up, I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that feels like it belongs to someone else. I placed the call log, bank printouts, and old receipt together in a folder marked Records. The kettle whistled again from the kitchen, steady and familiar. I poured the water over a tea bag, watching the color bloom and swirl. In the reflection of the window, I caught my own face, steady, composed, but lit by something new. Not fear, focus. I wasn't losing my house. I was finding the truth inside it. I spent the weekend sorting through my past, not as a sentimental ritual, but as evidence. The house felt heavier with each drawer I opened, every object whispering what it once cost. Some items still carried faint traces of Simon's laughter, back when laughter had no price tag. Others reminded me of the years when my paycheck barely stretched far enough for groceries, let alone dreams. I spread everything across the dining table. Old checkbooks, faded receipts, loan statements, tax folders yellowed at the edges. My handwriting crawled across them in neat columns, each number a relic of a different chapter. I found a file labeled Education Loans, 2006. Inside were the records of every payment I'd made to keep Simon in college after scholarships ran out. I remembered eating cereal for dinner those years, telling him I'd already eaten at the office. I remembered the pride in his voice when he said, "I'll pay you back one day, Mom." He never did. But at the time, it didn't matter. That promise was enough. In the corner of the box was a crumpled shoebox from a sporting goods store. Inside lay a pair of worn-out sneakers, and the old receipt folded neatly beneath them. The ink had faded almost to ghost, but the date was still visible. The day he graduated. The day I cried in the parking lot, watching him walk away in shoes I could barely afford. That receipt wasn't just paper. It was proof that love can be practical, that sacrifice has form. I sat there for a long time, holding it, and realized something that hurt more than anger. I hadn't been betrayed by a stranger. I'd been mistaken by my own son for someone who could be used. As the light shifted through the curtains, I took a breath and began arranging everything into folders. One for education loans, one for house expenses, one for bank statements, one labeled simply Simon. Each document I touched seemed to speak in its own quiet way, forming a pattern of my life spent giving, trusting, and rebuilding. In the evening, I called June. "Do you remember that year the roof leaked?" I asked. She laughed softly. "I remember the latter. You refused to wait for anyone to help. Said you didn't trust teenage boys with shingles." "I suppose I've always been too trusting and not trusting enough in the wrong places," I said. "Are you all right, Vera?" "I'm fine," I lied, though what I really meant was I will be. After we hung up, I sat by the window, the streetlights flickering to life one by one. Across the street, I could see a family setting the table for dinner. Children running, plates clattering, a rhythm that used to fill my own house. I wondered when Simon's laughter had turned into calculation, when his help had become hunger. I thought about the time he'd been caught using my old credit card in college. He'd sworn it was an accident. I'd paid the bill and forgiven him. I didn't even ask him to apologize. Forgiveness had felt like love then. Now it felt like a debt I'd been carrying alone. I opened my notebook and began writing. Not lists this time, but memories. The night his father died. The job I took cleaning offices part-time just to keep him in school. The Christmas, I skipped the trip home because he needed tuition money. Every sacrifice had a paper trail. I had just never read it all at once. At some point, I realized I wasn't crying. I was breathing deeper, steadier. There's a certain peace in seeing your life written down, even when the ink tells of loss. By midnight, the folders were stacked neatly, each labeled in my careful handwriting. I placed the sneakers receipt on top, sliding it into a transparent sleeve. It would serve as both proof and reminder, the smallest piece of paper holding the largest truth. I brewed another pot of tea and carried it to the table. The sound of the kettle, the creak of the chair, the hum of the refrigerator, they all blended into a quiet rhythm that felt like memory stitching itself together. I whispered into the stillness, "You raised a good man. Or at least you tried." Then, softer, "But you don't owe him your name." I slipped the final page into the folder and closed it. In that moment, I wasn't a victim of deceit. I was an accountant again, balancing the books of my own life, making sure every line added up. The house felt lighter now, as if the walls had exhaled with me. Outside, the first drops of rain finally began to fall. They tapped against the window, gently, like someone knocking to be let back in. I smiled and let them. Monday morning came with the sound of rain against the kitchen window. I woke before dawn, made coffee, and laid the folder on the table like a confession waiting for daylight. By the time the sun rose, the rain had turned into a soft drizzle. I dressed neatly, the way I used to for work, and carried the folder under my arm as if it were a shield. Harlan's office smelled of leather and paper, familiar, serious, reassuring. He greeted me with a small nod, motioning toward a chair across from his desk. His silver hair caught the morning light, and his glasses sat low on his nose, as though he'd already been reading something important before I arrived. "Let's see what we have," he said gently. I handed him the folder. He opened it carefully, flipping through each document with the practiced precision of a man who understood both numbers and motives. "Withdrawals," he murmured. "A new credit line, renovation stores, utility transfers. Yes, This is a pattern. He glanced at me. You're sure you didn't authorize any of this? I'm sure, I said. And he brought me more papers to sign, power of attorney, property forms. He said it was to make things easier. Harlan exhaled through his nose. Easier for him, not you. You did the right thing by not signing. He slid a few pages aside. These utilities, why is the water bill now in Simon's name? I leaned closer. I noticed that last month. He said it was to help manage my payments. I didn't think to question it. Never blame yourself for trust, he said, his tone firm but kind. It's the most expensive currency there is. He picked up a pen and began marking a few lines in red. We'll need copies of these bills, the bank statements, and that receipt from the renovation store. It ties the credit line to a physical purchase. That gives us jurisdiction for fraud. I nodded, watching the ink bleed softly into the paper. Also, he continued, I want you to have June act as a witness to your mental competence. Just routine. If this ever escalates, her statement could prevent any guardianship claim. I smiled faintly. She'll do it. She's seen everything without meaning to. Harlan looked up, his eyes steady. And Rosa? You mentioned her in your notes. She used to help me with the house. Simon paid her a few times after I stopped needing weekly help. There's a transfer in her name. He made another note. We'll keep that in mind. If she handled any papers, that could become relevant. The door opened quietly, and Miles stepped in, Rain still clinging to his coat. He nodded at me with a brief, polite smile. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, I've been following a few leads. That renovation store, Home and Hearth, shows a furniture order under your credit line. Delivery address matches Simon's current residence. Harlan looked at me. That's the confirmation we needed. Miles placed a small USB drive on the desk. CCTV footage, signed receipt, and delivery logs. I've also traced 2 phone calls made from his number to the bank branch where the new card was activated. I felt the room tilt slightly. He used his own phone? Miles nodded. It's not uncommon. People assume no one's watching. I folded my hands in my lap. The sound of rain filled the pause. Harlan leaned back. This gives us leverage. We're not pressing charges yet. We're gathering weight. Keep your composure, Vera. Silence works better than confrontation. I've learned that, I said softly. He gave me a look that was both admiration and warning. You're strong. But remember, strength is quiet until it needs to speak. When the meeting ended, I thanked them both. As I walked out into the gray morning, the drizzle had softened into mist. The street smelled of wet asphalt and coffee. I drove home slowly, the windshield wipers tracing metronomic arcs. At home, June waved from her porch. I crossed over, umbrella in hand. Would you mind stopping by later this week? I asked. Just to talk, maybe sign something if needed. She smiled, curiosity glinting behind her glasses. Of course, Vera. You know I'm always here. Inside, I spread the papers across the kitchen table once more. The pattern looked colder now, but also clearer. Utilities, loans, medical claims, all forming the architecture of deceit. I added one final sticky note to the top of the folder. Everything adds up eventually. When the phone rang, I answered, expecting Harlan. Instead, it was Rosa. Mrs. Caldwell, she said hesitantly. I think I made a mistake a while back. I didn't understand what it was for. Simon asked me to copy some documents for him, just a few pages from your file cabinet. I thought it was harmless. Her voice trembled. It's all right, Rosa, I said calmly. We'll talk soon. Just keep whatever you remember. After I hung up, I looked at the folder again, the pages that now held proof of both deception and redemption. People show who they are eventually, some through lies, some through remorse. The rain outside deepened. drumming softly against the glass. I poured a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the garden darken under the clouds. The kettle's whistle faded into the rhythm of the rain, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my fear giving way to something steadier. Not anger, precision. By Tuesday morning, the rain had lifted, leaving behind a washed silence that made the neighborhood look almost new. The ground still glistened, puddles catching bits of the pale sky. I spent most of the morning at the table, sorting through what Harlan had marked, waiting for Miles to call. When he finally did, his tone carried both purpose and care. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "I've got something you'll want to see. Mind if I stop by in an hour?" "Please do," I answered. When he arrived, he carried a manila envelope, worn at the edges, and a portable drive that dangled from his keychain. He greeted me politely, then placed everything on the table. "I went through the footage from Home and Hearth," he said. "You might want to sit down for this." I didn't sit. I stood behind him as he opened his laptop and played the footage. The timestamp showed 2 weeks earlier. There was Simon, standing at the checkout counter, leaning casually against it while handing over a credit card. My name was printed clearly on the small screen beside the register. He smiled as the clerk scanned the purchase: a dining table, a sofa, and a set of chairs. I recognized the brand immediately. I had picked the same model years ago for my own home. Miles paused the footage and turned to me. "He signed for delivery under your name. The order was sent to his address. I pulled the receipt too." He slid it toward me. My name, again. My handwriting, imitated but not quite right. The loops too tight, the line too straight. It was strange, seeing yourself forged by your own child. "I've seen that signature before," I said quietly. "When he was little, he used to copy mine on permission slips for school." Miles nodded. "People don't change habits, they just raise the stakes." He clicked another file, this time a recording. The sound was muffled, background noise from what seemed like a car. Then Simon's voice came through, strained and hurried. I had no choice. She'd never give it up willingly. "I just need to fix this mess before Naomi finds out." I froze. The words felt like a door slamming shut on every excuse I'd ever made for him. Miles stopped the recording, giving me space. That was left on a voicemail to one of the store managers. He must have called them trying to cover the charges. I sat down, finally. My hands trembled, not from shock, but from recognition. That tone, that urgency, it was the same one he used as a boy when he broke something and didn't want me to know. Miles leaned forward. "This isn't just fraud, Mrs. Caldwell. It's a pattern of dependency and pressure. He's been using your identity to fund a life he can't afford." I nodded slowly, the words settling into place like weights finding balance. "He's drowning," I said. "And he's trying to use my name as a raft." "That's one way to put it." He opened the envelope and pulled out a printed log. I traced several calls between Simon's number and Naomi's office. There's coordination. And here, Caleb Monroe, a shop employee, confirmed he saw Simon present your card personally. Caleb's willing to testify if needed. The evidence sat on the table between us, solid and undeniable. The house felt smaller again, but not weaker, just sharper, like it was paying attention. Miles looked at me carefully. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. "I want him to know what it feels like to be seen." He smiled faintly. "That's rarer than punishment." We spent another hour organizing everything. When he left, he said, "Harlan and I will prepare the package. Keep your phone nearby. We'll need your signature for the affidavit. And Vera, don't reach out to him, not directly. He's already unstable." "I won't," I said. He'll come to me soon enough. After he left, I walked through the house slowly, touching the edges of things I'd once dusted with love. The framed photographs, the vase by the window, the chair he'd built with his father in high school. Everything seemed to hold its breath. In the kitchen, I poured myself tea, though I barely tasted it. I thought about Simon's voice on that recording, how he said he had no choice. There's always a choice, I wanted to tell him. The hardest ones are just the ones that demand humility. As evening fell, I stepped outside. The air carried the faint scent of wet soil. June's porch light was on. She was reading, a blanket over her lap. She looked up and smiled softly. "You all right, Vera?" she called. "I'm getting there," I replied. "One page at a time." She nodded, understanding more than the words said. Back inside, I opened my notebook again and wrote, "He's not evil. He's afraid, but fear is not a free pass." I closed the book, turned off the lights, and let the darkness settle where it belonged. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like proof that I could still see clearly. By Wednesday morning, everything had shifted from confusion to order. The folder that once felt like chaos now looked like design. Each document told a story, each name a thread in something deliberate. Harlan called just after breakfast. "Vera," he said, "I've reviewed what Miles found. We're past suspicion now. We're building a case." His voice carried that steady rhythm that made me trust him from the start. "I'm ready," I said simply. "I'd like you to come in this afternoon," he replied. "We'll go over strategy. I'm also bringing in a social worker named Tess Rinaldi. She'll do a standard capacity assessment. It's protocol when we anticipate a guardianship petition." "Guardianship?" The word cut sharper than I expected. "Yes," he said softly. "If Simon claims you're not capable of managing your affairs, the court could transfer control. But don't worry. Tess is fair, and we'll have this documented before he even tries." I took a slow breath. "Then I'll see you this afternoon." When I arrived, Tess was already in the office, a woman around my age, hair tied neatly, eyes kind but alert. She extended her hand with a smile that reminded me of teachers who notice everything. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said warmly, "this is purely routine. I just want to get a sense of how you've been managing your life. Think of it as a conversation, not a test." "I've managed my life for 62 years, I said, smiling faintly. "I think I can handle a few more questions." She chuckled, her pen ready. Perfect answer. For the next 30 minutes, she asked about my routines, my medications, my understanding of the situation. I answered clearly, honestly. When she finished, she closed her folder and looked at Harlan. "She's competent, very competent, and more aware than most people half her age." I smiled, though inside I felt something deeper than relief. I felt seen. Harlan waited for Tess to leave before sliding a stack of documents across the table. "These are the materials we'll file. I've included the bank records, CCTV stills, Caleb's statement, and the voicemail transcript. Rosa's affidavit will come next. And here," he pointed to a page near the bottom, "this is a civil complaint draft. It lists damages and financial misrepresentation. Once we file this, Simon's team can't spin the story quietly." "Public filing?" I asked. He nodded. "It's the only way to protect you. If this stays private, he controls the narrative. If it's public, you control the truth." I studied the papers. "Then we'll do it publicly." Harlan leaned back, his expression almost proud. "Good. I've also added something else. A protective clause tied to your property deed. It states that any future attempt to transfer ownership without your consent activates an automatic injunction. You won't have to fight twice." "That's smart," I said. It's necessary, he replied. People like Simon use emotion as leverage. Law neutralizes that. Miles entered a few minutes later, dropping off a sealed envelope. Everything from Caleb checked out. We're solid, he said. And I traced the renovation payments through Naomi's account. She's tied in. I looked at Harlan. She knew. She did, he said. And she'll have to face it too. For a moment, silence filled the room. It wasn't heavy. It was sharp, like the quiet before the judge enters a courtroom. Harlan finally spoke. We'll file the suit Friday morning. Until then, live as you normally would. Don't answer their calls unless it's in writing. Let the law speak first. I nodded. I can do that. On the way home, I rolled down the window, letting the wind move through the car. The city blurred by. Signs, people, noise. But inside me, everything was steady. Back home, I brewed tea and set the papers on the table. The house felt different now. Not smaller, not haunted, simply aware. Like it knew it had become evidence of something deeper. The cost of love when left unguarded. June came by just before sunset, holding a small basket of lemons. You looked serious earlier, she said. Everything all right? I'm just making sure everything adds up, I told her, smiling faintly. She chuckled. You and your numbers. They've always told the truth, I said. Even when people don't. When she left, I watched her walk down the driveway, her figure framed by the soft gold light of evening. Then I sat at my table again, pen in hand, and wrote in my notebook, Silence is my witness until the truth is ready to speak. As night settled, I closed the folder and rested my palm over it, feeling the weight of it against the wood. Not a burden, not any more, just proof. Proof that even after all these years, I could still defend what was mine without losing who I was. I turned off the light, letting the dark fill the room like a seal over ink that had finally dried. Friday arrived warm and deceptively peaceful. The morning sunlight spilled across my kitchen floor like nothing in the world had changed. The kettle hissed softly. The house smelled faintly of lemon and soap, and yet under all of it was something alive. A quiet hum of expectation. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the day I'd let him reveal himself. Simon called mid-morning. His voice was cheerful in a way that sounded rehearsed. Hey, Mom, Naomi and I thought we'd drop by tonight, have dinner, clear the air a little. I paused just long enough for the silence to stretch. Of course, I said finally. 7 works fine. After I hung up, I called Miles. It's happening tonight, I told him. I'll be ready, he said. I'll bring the recorder. Just talk as you usually do. Let him do the rest. By the time the clock struck 6:30, the house was spotless. I set the table with the old china, lit a single candle, and placed a vase of white lilies in the center. Everything looked calm, forgiving even. But under the table, hidden beneath the lace runner, was Miles's small recording device, already on, already listening. When Simon and Naomi arrived, they brought the kind of energy that always fills a room with static. Naomi wore a smile too polished, and Simon hugged me too tightly, the way guilty people do. Dinner smells amazing, he said, looking around. You've been busy. I find cooking helps me think, I replied. Sit down. You must be hungry. For a few minutes, everything sounded normal, the clink of silverware, the rhythm of small talk. But tension has a way of surfacing, no matter how much you season the food. Naomi broke first. Simon's been under a lot of stress, she said carefully. You have no idea how much he worries about you living alone. I smiled, cutting a piece of roast chicken. He worries about me? Simon sighed. Mom, can we not make this a thing? You've always been independent, but you're not young anymore. You can't keep pretending nothing's changing." "Pretending?" I said quietly. "I pay my bills, I drive, I read the fine print. What part of that is pretend?" Naomi leaned forward. "We're just trying to protect you from mistakes, from people who might take advantage." The irony nearly made me laugh. "I see," I said softly. "And that protection includes opening credit accounts in my name?" Simon's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "What?" I met his eyes. "Home and hearth renovations, a dining set, a sofa, and a credit line. Does that sound familiar?" His jaw tightened. "Where are you getting this from?" "From the truth," I said, calm as a metronome. "It's been following you around for weeks. You should have noticed by now." Naomi looked at him, confusion sliding into panic. "Simon, what is she talking about?" He stood suddenly, knocking his chair back. "You hired someone, didn't you? You went through my life like I'm some criminal." "I went through my life," I said, my voice still even. "And you were standing in the middle of it." He leaned across the table, anger clouding his face. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You sit here in your little world, judging me. You have no idea what it's like to carry everything." "Everything?" I asked. "Or everyone?" The candle flickered between us, its flame trembling with the air. Naomi whispered his name, but he didn't hear her. He was unraveling in real time. "Do you think I wanted this?" he snapped. "You never helped me when I needed it most." "I gave you everything I had," I said softly. "You mistook it for permission to take more." He slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're some saint? You're not. You're just too proud to admit you need help." Miles's recorder blinked quietly beneath the lace. Naomi's voice shook. "Simon, stop, please." But he wasn't listening. He was caught in his own storm. "You know what? Maybe you shouldn't live here alone. Maybe someone should make decisions for you." That was the line I'd been waiting for. I stood, slow and deliberate, and gathered the plates one by one. "Dinner's over," I said. "You should go." Naomi looked like she wanted to speak, but Simon was already walking toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. When it closed behind them, the silence returned with a kind of grace. Miles stepped out from the hallway a moment later, holding the small recorder. "Got it all," he said quietly. "Good," I replied. He gave me exactly what I needed. He nodded, his expression softening. "You did well. That wasn't easy." "Nothing worth keeping ever is," I said. He left soon after, promising to send the transcript to Harlan in the morning. I cleaned the table slowly, careful not to disturb the candle still burning low. As I rinsed the dishes, I could still hear Simon's words echoing faintly in my head. His anger, his fear, his desperation. But beneath it all was something smaller, sadder. The voice of a boy who'd never learned the difference between love and ownership. When the last plate was dry, I blew out the candle and turned toward the quiet house. "Decisions," I whispered. "Yes, I'll make mine." By Saturday morning, the internet had already chosen its side. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Most were silent calls that hung up the moment I answered. When I finally checked my social media, the reason became clear. There it was, Simon's post. A smiling photo of him and Naomi at our old family picnic, my arm around him, my face soft, trusting. The caption read, "When your own mother turns against you. Please pray for families torn apart by greed and manipulation." Underneath, hundreds of comments bloomed like weeds. "She's old, poor thing. Probably confused. Some kids have it so hard taking care of parents who won't accept help. What a devoted son." Naomi's friends had shared it too, polished with hashtags about family, loyalty, and love. The image was staged perfection, warm, nostalgic, manipulative. I sat in my kitchen, the light from the screen flickering against my teacup, and felt a strange stillness settle over me. I wasn't angry. I was studying the performance. When I called Miles, he already knew. "I saw the post," he said. "It's circulating fast. Naomi's PR contacts are boosting it. Same people who did their wedding campaign." "Wedding campaign?" He chuckled darkly. "They had a media team for their vows. Her firm specializes in social optics, curating narratives of family unity. That's her phrase, not mine." I let that sit for a moment, then said, "So this is a story to them?" "Yes," he said, "but stories leave footprints. We'll follow them." I spent the afternoon as if nothing had happened. I washed dishes, watered plants, and baked a pie I didn't really want. Outside, June waved from her porch. I waved back, smiling the way people do when pretending not to be in the middle of a storm. By evening, Harlan called. "I've seen it," he said. "Let them talk. Their narrative is built on sympathy, not truth. It will crumble under evidence." He paused, his tone softening. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said. "You told me once silence can be strategy. I'm learning." "Good," he said. "Miles and I have already pulled metadata from the post. It's been boosted by Naomi's PR firm. That connects her directly. We'll add it to the exhibit list." The next morning, I noticed a few cars slowing down as they passed my house. One woman even stopped to take a photo of the front gate. I closed the curtains and sat quietly, letting the chatter outside fade. I had spent my life avoiding public spectacle. Now my private pain had been turned into content. But even that had value. It showed how far they were willing to go. Miles texted around noon. "We found a financial trail." Payment to the PR firm came from Simon's account 2 days before the post went up. I stared at the message for a long time, the corner of my mouth lifting slightly. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs patience. That evening, I took a walk by myself. The streets were quiet, golden with sunset. A few neighbors glanced at me, their expressions awkward, uncertain. I nodded politely and kept walking. When I returned, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The horizon glowed faintly pink, the air cooling as the first stars appeared. I thought of all the years I had taught Simon the difference between right and easy, and how he must have mistaken my calm for weakness. Inside, the answering machine blinked red. I pressed play. His voice filled the room. "Mom, I know you've seen the post. Please don't make this worse. You're letting other people poison you against us. We're family." He hesitated, breathing heavily. "We can still fix this if you just trust me." The line clicked off. I sat there in the half-dark, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock. Trust. He still used that word like it was currency he hadn't already spent. When the phone rang again, I let it go to voicemail. This time it was Naomi. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable. "Vera, please. Simon's under a lot of pressure. He's just trying to do what's right. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I simply whispered to the empty room, "You've said enough." Later that night, I opened my notebook and wrote, "They made me the villain in their story. I'll let them. Villains don't panic. They prepare." Then I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and went to bed. The house, loyal as ever, held its silence around me like a promise. Monday morning began with a knock at my door that felt heavier than it should have. When I opened it, the courier standing there wore the faint impatience of someone who delivers bad news for a living. He handed me a thick envelope stamped with legal markings. "Service of complaint," he said. I smiled politely. You're a day early. Inside the envelope was Harlan's handiwork, our formal civil complaint, neat and deliberate. Every line told a truth Simon had worked hard to bury. Fraudulent credit activity, forged signature, unauthorized financial access. Every piece backed by evidence. My name wasn't a question anymore. It was proof. At 9 o'clock sharp, Harlan called. "It's filed," he said. "Case number ending in 471. The clerk stamped it before the courthouse opened. By noon, they'll be served." I exhaled slowly. "Then it's official." "It is. And Vera," he said gently, "you've done nothing wrong. Remember that when people start to talk." By midday, the murmurs had already begun. June called after lunch, her voice a mix of concern and quiet admiration. "I saw something online," she said carefully. "People saying you're suing your son." "I'm not suing my son," I said. "I'm protecting myself from someone who forgot I'm still his mother." There was silence on the line. Then she said softly, "Good for you." That afternoon, Miles stopped by with updates. He set his briefcase on the table and pulled out a set of printed voicemails. "He's been calling your old landline," he said. "We recorded every message." He pressed play. Simon's voice filled the kitchen, raw and uneven. "Mom, we can work this out. You don't have to drag this into court. You're being manipulated." Another one, an hour later. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Just call me back, please." And then the last one, the one that chilled me. "If you go through with this, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." Miles watched my face carefully. "He's unraveling," he said. I folded my hands together. "He's scared. Fear sounds like anger when it's losing its power." He nodded. "The local paper might pick up the filing. I'll handle that if they call." "Thank you," I said. "Let them write what they want. The truth's already written in ink." Later that evening, as the light dimmed across the living room, I sat in my favorite chair and read through the complaint again. The pages rustled softly in my hands. There was something powerful in seeing your life reduced to evidence, something both painful and clean. At 6 o'clock, Naomi called. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a message arrived instead. "You've gone too far, Vera. We were trying to help. You'll regret this." I read it twice, then placed my phone face down on the table. Regret had already come and gone years ago. What was left now was resolve. That night, as the neighborhood quieted, I stood by the window watching the faint flicker of June's television across the yard. The air outside was heavy with the scent of summer rain. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, low and mournful. I whispered to the dark, "Let them think I'm alone. It will make the truth louder when it arrives." The next morning, Harlan called again. "We've received contact from their attorney. They're asking about a settlement." I didn't answer right away. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. "So they know they're losing." "They know you're prepared," he said. "That's usually the same thing." "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," he said. "Let me and Miles handle the responses. They'll push, they'll plead, they'll posture. Don't engage. Just keep being steady." "I can do that." "Good," he said. "This is where quiet wins." When I hung up, I walked to the kitchen and opened the window. The scent of wet earth drifted in, rich and grounding. I looked out at the small garden I'd planted after my husband died. Tomatoes, rosemary, the stubborn basil that refused to die no matter the season. Every leaf glistened with rain. They had survived storms I'd long forgotten, and so would I. That night, before bed, I wrote one line in my notebook. "Noise can't drown truth. It only makes people listen closer." Then I placed the notebook beside my pillow and turned off the light, the glow of the moon spilling quietly across the room like an old friend keeping watch. The days that followed felt oddly calm, as if the storm had finally remembered its manners. For the first time in weeks, I could hear the birds again in the morning, the faint whistle of a train at dusk. But calm has its own tension. It waits for what's next, pretending it isn't waiting at all. The silence broke on a Tuesday evening when the phone rang. It was Rosa. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd been rehearsing a confession. "Mrs. Caldwell," she began softly, "I owe you an apology. I should have called sooner." I sat down, my hands still from instinct more than control. "You don't owe me anything, Rosa. Say what you need to." "I made copies," she whispered. "The papers Simon asked for a few months ago. He said you wanted them backed up. House deeds, some account forms. I didn't think twice. He gave me $50 and said it was a favor. I swear I didn't know what it was for until I saw your name on the news." She paused, breathing unsteadily. "I'm so sorry." The sound of her voice didn't sting. It was weary, honest, human. "You're not the first person he's used," I said gently. "But you can be the first to make it right." "I already spoke to Mr. Price," she said. "He helped me write a statement. I signed it. He said it'll help your case." I felt my breath catch. Relief, sorrow, gratitude all tangled in one quiet exhale. "Thank you, Rosa." "There's something else," she added hesitantly. "He promised to pay off my late rent if I didn't tell you. When I said no after the news came out, he stopped answering my calls. I kept every message." "Keep them safe," I said. "They matter now." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet house for a long while. It wasn't the betrayal that stayed with me. It was her voice breaking when she said she was sorry. There's a kind of remorse that redeems both sides at once. That night, Harlan came by. He carried a thin folder under his arm and wore that look of careful relief, the look of someone who's almost at the end of a long equation. "She signed," he said simply. "Sworn affidavit. It's solid. She confirms she photocopied documents for Simon and received payment." He placed the affidavit on the table. I glanced over the neat paragraphs, Rosa's handwriting at the bottom, shaky but certain. "This ends it," I murmured. "Almost," he replied. "The legal part, yes, but not the human part. These things always echo for a while." We sat in silence for a few moments. Outside, thunder rolled distantly, a soft reminder that peace is rarely silent. "Do you think he'll stop?" I asked. Harlan leaned back, folding his arms. "People stop when they lose their audience. You've taken that from him. He'll run out of noise soon." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'll finally sleep." "You will," he said, standing. "You've earned it." After he left, I poured myself a glass of water and walked to the window. June's porch light was off. The street was dim except for the faint reflection of my own living room. I caught my reflection in the glass, a woman no longer defined by fear or defense, but by quiet certainty. Later that night, the rain began again. I listened to it as I lay in bed, the rhythm steady against the roof. Each drop sounded like a release, like the earth itself forgiving what had been taken. I thought of Simon and Naomi, what their nights must sound like now. Maybe silence had turned on them too. Maybe it was finally asking questions they couldn't answer. Before I fell asleep, I reached for my notebook and wrote, "Even betrayal has a voice. It just sounds different when it's telling the truth." The next morning, I woke to sunlight. The air smelled clean, almost forgiving. June came over with muffins wrapped in foil. She hugged me tightly and said, "The whole neighborhood's talking, Vera, but this time it's admiration, not gossip." I laughed softly. "Then let them talk." "Rosa came by my porch," she said. She looked lighter, like she'd put something down she'd been carrying too long. She did, I said. So did I. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, tracing my finger over Rosa's signature on the affidavit. It wasn't perfect handwriting, but it was honest. That's rarer. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to check my phone, or the locks, or the bank accounts. The papers were all in order, but more than that, so was I. The settlement meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. I arrived early, the kind of early that comes from wanting to stand on steady ground before anyone else walks in. The conference room was quiet, too cold for comfort, the blinds drawn tight against the sun. A pitcher of water sat untouched on the table. I could see my reflection in the glass, calm, deliberate, older than I remembered, but stronger too. Simon and Naomi came in together, their lawyer trailing behind. They looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in certainty. Naomi's confidence had thinned into silence. Simon's eyes darted anywhere but toward mine. Harlan greeted their attorney with the cool civility of someone who knew the law was already on his side. He began the meeting. "We're here to discuss terms of restitution," he said evenly. "My client, Mrs. Caldwell, has documented evidence of financial exploitation and unauthorized account use. The purpose of today's discussion is to resolve this matter without further escalation." Simon's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client wishes to avoid litigation and repair the damage done. We're prepared to offer repayment of the disputed funds in full." Harlan folded his hands. $18,500 across 3 years, plus damages of $5,000 for emotional distress and defamation. Payment in certified funds, not installments. The lawyer nodded quickly, already scribbling notes. Naomi shifted in her seat, her bracelets clinking faintly in the silence. "And," Harlan added, "a public statement of admission. The same platforms used to defame Mrs. Caldwell will be used to correct the record." Simon's head snapped up. "What?" Harlan didn't flinch. "You made this public, Mr. Caldwell. The correction should be public, too." Simon's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering something that made his jaw tighten. After a moment, Simon said flatly, "Fine. Whatever it takes to end this." I watched him, not gloating, not triumphant, just still. There was no pleasure in winning a war you never wanted. As the lawyers finalized the terms, Harlan slid one more document across the table. "And finally," he said, "a covenant clause. Mrs. Caldwell's property deed will include an automatic injunction clause. If her residence is ever subject to claim or transfer attempt by the parties present, the court will immediately enforce ownership in her favor." Simon's lawyer blinked. "That's unusual." "It's necessary," Harlan said. "We're not here to trade forgiveness for risk." Naomi's voice broke the quiet for the first time. "This is humiliation," she said softly. Harlan looked at her with calm precision. "No, Mrs. Caldwell, this is closure." Simon scribbled his name on each page without looking up. The pen scraped against paper in quick, angry lines. When he was done, he pushed the folder forward. "Happy now?" I looked at him, not with anger, but with a kind of tired compassion. "No, Simon," I said gently. "There's no happiness in this, only balance." Naomi stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "I can't do this," she muttered, and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her like a sentence ending. When everything was signed, Harlan gathered the documents neatly and handed me my copy. "It's over," he said. "The money will be transferred by Monday, the public statement by end of week." I nodded, though I knew something he didn't. Legal endings aren't emotional ones. The law can fix the papers, but not the silence that follows. Simon lingered after his lawyer left. His shoulders sagged, the defiance draining from his posture. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. That's what makes it hurt. He swallowed hard. I thought if I could just get ahead, if I could prove I wasn't a failure, maybe you'd be proud of me again. I was proud, I said softly, until you thought you had to steal to be seen. He looked at me, eyes glistening in the sterile light. For a second, I saw the boy he once was, the one who waited at the window for me to come home. Then it was gone. He nodded once and walked out without another word. Harlan touched my arm lightly. You handled that with grace. I didn't come here to fight, I said, just to finish. When I got home, I placed my copy of the agreement in the desk drawer with the other folders. The house was still, the air lighter somehow. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Through the glass, I could see June tending to her roses. She looked up, caught my eye, and smiled. A small, knowing smile that said more than words could. For the first time in months, I smiled back without pretending. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Justice isn't loud." It's paperwork signed in ink that doesn't shake. Then I closed it, turned off the lamp, and whispered into the quiet, "We're done here." By Monday morning, the first payment cleared. Harlan called early, his tone a mixture of victory and relief. "Funds have arrived," he said. "Certified transfer, exactly as agreed. It's done, Vera." I thanked him quietly, staring at the balance on the screen. The numbers were clean, final. Money had never been the point, but seeing it there, returned, not given, felt like air filling lungs that had been shallow too long. That afternoon, I met with Evelyn Price, the realtor Harlan had recommended months ago. Her office smelled faintly of sea salt and citrus, the kind of scent meant to sell a dream. She looked up from her desk, her smile genuine and steady. "You must be Vera. I've heard so much about you from my cousin." "Harlan?" She grinned. "He said you'd be one of the few clients who knows exactly what she wants." I smiled back. "A small cottage near the coast. Nothing fancy. Just something quiet, away from all this noise." "I have the perfect place," she said, pulling a folder from her drawer. Seaside town called Bodega Bay. 2 bedrooms, a garden in the back, and a porch that faces the sunset. She laid out the photos, and I could almost hear the ocean through the paper. The house was simple. Whitewashed walls, pale blue shutters, ivy creeping up one side like it was holding the place together. It didn't look new. It looked earned. "I'll take it," I said. Evelyn laughed. "You haven't even seen it yet." "I don't need to. I've been there in my head for weeks." By evening, we had opened an escrow account under my maiden name. The process was quiet, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Evelyn assured me it would stay private until closing. No paper trail would lead back to Simon or Naomi. It was mine, truly mine. That night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and fading light. The house felt like it was exhaling with me, every corner releasing years of noise and heartache. I brewed tea, sat on the couch, and stared at the blank spot on the wall where a picture of Simon used to hang. I had taken it down earlier that day, wrapped it gently in newspaper. The phone buzzed, a notification. Simon's public admission had gone live. His words appeared in black and white, sterile but binding. I, Simon Caldwell, acknowledge that my mother, Vera Caldwell, was the victim of my unauthorized financial actions. I apologize publicly for my behavior and confirm that all matters have been resolved in accordance with legal counsel. Below it, Naomi had shared the post without comment. For once, her silence seemed like an act of surrender, not control. I read the statement twice, then closed my phone. No anger, no pride, just a deep, clean quiet. June stopped by that evening, holding a small casserole dish. For the woman who just made the front page of Justice, she teased. I laughed softly. It's strange, June. Everyone keeps saying I won, but it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like setting a bone that broke a long time ago. She nodded. That's what healing is. Painful, but necessary. As the evening deepened, I walked her out to the porch. The air smelled of wet soil and new beginnings. Fireflies blinked in the garden like tiny confirmations from the universe. When she left, I sat alone on the steps, listening to the hum of crickets. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Naomi. I'm sorry for my part in all of this. I didn't stop him when I should have. I hope you find peace. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. We all choose our silences. I hope yours finally brings you truth. Then I set the phone down, folded my hands, and let the night hold me. The next morning, I met Evelyn at the title office. She handed me the closing documents with a smile. It's official, she said. You're a homeowner again. I signed each page carefully, the pen gliding steady across the lines. When the last signature was done, I placed the pen down and exhaled. Congratulations, she said. When will you move in? Soon, I said, smiling. There's one more thing I need to do first. As I walked out into the sunlight, the air tasted different. Lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's mother, victim, or caretaker. I was simply Vera. That night, I stood in the middle of my empty living room, the echo of the house wrapping around me like a benediction. I whispered to it, "Thank you for holding me." Then I taped the final box shut, labeled it in neat handwriting, and placed it by the door. Tomorrow, I would begin again. Friday dawned soft and golden, the kind of morning that hides its drama behind calm skies. My car was already packed, boxes labeled neatly, one small suitcase, a folder of documents on the passenger seat. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table one last time, listening to the clock tick the way it always had. There's a special quiet that comes when a chapter knows it's ending. By noon, I was already on the road. The moving truck would follow a few hours later, but not to my new address. That was part of Harlan's design. He'd insisted the legal papers be delivered the same hour Simon planned his move-in. He'd timed everything perfectly. The courier, the court notice, the neighbor witness. It wasn't revenge. It was choreography. At 3:00, Harlan called. "Everything's in motion," he said. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the night he said, 'This house is ours now,'" I answered. He chuckled softly. "Then enjoy the view. You've earned it." I drove toward the coast, sunlight spilling across the road like a promise. My phone buzzed twice before I reached the main highway, but I didn't look. Whatever it was could wait. Back in town, events were unfolding, just as planned. Simon's truck pulled into my driveway, loaded high with boxes. Naomi sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses shielding whatever emotion remained. 2 movers trailed behind in a rental van. June watched from her porch, a book in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. When Simon stepped out, he looked lighter than I'd expected, relieved, almost excited. He walked to the door, keys in hand, rehearsed confidence in his stride, but instead of an open doorway, he found a man in a gray suit standing there, holding a clipboard. "Simon Caldwell?" the man asked. "Yes," Simon replied, impatient. "We're moving in. Is there a problem?" The man handed him a large envelope. "You've been served. Court-verified injunction and property notice. The residence remains under sole ownership of Mrs. Vera Caldwell. Any attempt to occupy or alter the premises will violate a standing order." Naomi stepped forward, her voice sharp. "What are you talking about? She gave us this house." The man didn't blink. "Not according to the county registrar, ma'am." He pointed to the paper in Simon's shaking hand. As of this morning, title confirmed. Owner, Vera Caldwell. June set her book down. For a moment, the entire street held its breath. Simon's voice cracked. This can't be right, she said, but there was no one left to listen. The movers shifted uncomfortably, one whispering to the other, then began loading the boxes back onto the truck without waiting for instruction. Naomi turned away, tears hidden behind her sunglasses. Across the yard, June stood slowly and said, "Some houses remember who built them." By the time the court officer left, Simon was standing alone by the mailbox, the deed still trembling in his hands. The afternoon light turned harsh, exposing every inch of his disbelief. He didn't notice June's camera in her lap, recording the moment for the record. That video would spread later, neighbors sharing it quietly, no captions needed. The image spoke for itself, a man staring at a paper that proved the truth he'd tried to erase. Meanwhile, I was miles away, parked by a bluff overlooking the Pacific. The ocean below crashed against the rocks in slow rhythm, steady and endless. I opened the windows, letting salt air fill the car. My phone buzzed again, another call from Simon. I watched it ring, then fade into silence. When it stopped, I said softly to no one, "Some lessons only arrive after the echo." By evening, Harlan called again. "It's done," he said. "The court officer confirmed delivery. The injunction is active. The title stands uncontested." "Thank you," I said, "for helping me do this quietly." "It's the only way to win with dignity," he replied. "He'll calm down in time, maybe even learn something from it." I watched the sun sink into the horizon, the sky folding itself into shades of amber and rose. "Maybe," I said, "but that part isn't mine to manage anymore." After the call, I drove the final miles to the cottage. Evelyn was waiting by the gate, her smile warm and proud. "Welcome home," she said, handing me a small brass key. The ocean stretched out behind her, vast and forgiving. I could hear it in the distance, the steady breath of something older than anger, deeper than loss. "Home," I repeated. "Yes, I think that's what this finally is." I walked through the door and set the key on the counter, feeling the floorboards creak beneath me. The sound wasn't unfamiliar. It was a reminder that even new beginnings come with old echoes. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from some forgotten garden. I closed my eyes and listened, the sea answering in waves. The next morning, I woke to the sound of waves rolling in steady rhythm beyond the window. The ocean breathed for me, slow and certain, as if it had been waiting for this peace long before I arrived. Light spilled across the floorboards, soft and gold, touching the edges of the packed boxes I hadn't yet opened. I brewed coffee and stepped outside to the porch. The air was cool, the sky stretched wide and forgiving. For the first time in months, there was no rush, no tension, just the quiet hum of a life returned to itself. I sat down, wrapped my hands around the mug, and listened to the gulls crying over the water. By noon, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. The screen showed a familiar number, Simon. For a long moment, I just looked at it, letting the silence around me decide whether to play it. Eventually, I pressed listen. His voice came through small, unsteady. "Mom, it's me. I know you don't want to hear from me. I get that. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry. I thought I was fixing things, not breaking them. I thought if I had control, I could finally prove I wasn't failing you." He paused, breath shaky. "I know you won't pick up, and maybe you shouldn't. I don't blame you. I just wanted you to know I'm starting to see what I did. I'm going to get help. I promise." The message ended with a soft click. I sat there for a long time, the sea stretching endless before me. There was no satisfaction in hearing regret, only the strange ache of a truth arriving too late. That evening, Harlan called. "I got the final confirmation," he said. "The injunction's permanent, property uncontested, all funds cleared. It's officially over." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, Harlan, for standing beside me." "You stood for yourself, Vera," he said kindly. "I just made sure the law remembered your name." Miles dropped by later, his car kicking up small bursts of dust along the road. He handed me a folder. "Closure documents," he said. "I thought you'd want the originals. And there's something else." He placed a flash drive on the table. June sent me the footage. The day of the moving truck. It's everywhere now. Not viral in a cruel way. People are calling it poetic justice. The mother who kept her home. You've become a kind of quiet legend. I smiled, shaking my head. I didn't want fame. Just fairness. "That's exactly why it resonates," he said. "People are tired of noise. You reminded them that silence can still win." After he left, I stood on the porch again, the folder in my hand. The sun was beginning to sink, staining the sea with copper and rose. In the distance, the tide pulled in and out, indifferent yet kind. I whispered softly, "Let it go," though I wasn't sure whether I meant the papers, the past, or the ache that lingered between them. Later, when the first stars appeared, my phone rang again. It was Simon, this time without leaving a voicemail. I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. Some doors don't need to be locked. They just need to stay closed for a while. Inside, I made tea and sat at the table, the gentle clink of the spoon echoing through the room. I thought of Naomi, her last message, her silence since. Maybe she too was learning that the cost of complicity is loneliness. Maybe she was finally free of the image she'd worked so hard to maintain. As I sipped, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness had dissolved somewhere between the courthouse and the ocean air. What remained wasn't triumph. It was peace, quiet and precise, like the sound of a page turning. I walked to the bedroom, where the box with the sneakers receipt sat on the dresser. I opened it gently, the paper inside still faintly creased, still smelling of time. I traced the faded ink with my fingertip. The receipt had survived everything. Debt, deceit, even distance. It was proof that love, once pure, doesn't disappear. It just changes form. I placed it back inside and whispered, "We're even now, Simon. You took what you needed. I kept what mattered." Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, "Justice doesn't always sound like a gavel. Sometimes it sounds like the sea." When I turned off the lamp, the room glowed faintly in the moonlight. I could hear the waves through the open window, their rhythm slow and eternal. I let them lull me into sleep, not as someone who had won, but as someone who had finally stopped fighting. The next morning began with the hush of salt wind through the open window. The ocean glimmered in soft silver light, unbothered, eternal. I rose slowly, the way one does when there's no need to rush, when life has finally stopped demanding proof of survival. The kettle whistled quietly, steady as breath. I brewed coffee, stepped onto the porch, and watched the horizon unfold. It had been weeks since the court filings, days since the last call. Simon hadn't reached out again. Neither had Naomi. And for once, the silence between us didn't ache. It settled. It became something whole. I walked to the edge of the porch, the wooden planks cool beneath my feet, and let my eyes travel across the water. It stretched wide and forgiving, as though it had never seen conflict. Waves came and went, each one carrying a lesson, that nothing truly belongs to us, not even pain. We only hold it until we're ready to let it drift away. Later that morning, June's car appeared at the end of the road. She stepped out with her ever-present basket and a grin. "You didn't think I'd let you start a new chapter without homemade pie, did you?" I laughed, the sound light and free. "You found me anyway." "I always do," she said, handing over the basket. "The neighborhood's quieter now. People still talk about that day, you know. You've inspired half the town to review their own deeds." I smiled. "Then maybe something good came of it." She stayed for coffee, and we sat on the porch like we'd done 100 times before, the breeze tugging at our hair. Harlan called while we were talking, his voice warm as ever. "Final file closed," he said. "Court archived everything this morning. You're officially free, Vera." "Free," I repeated softly, tasting the word like it was new. "That feels different than I imagined." He chuckled. "Freedom always does." Not long after, Miles stopped by with a small envelope. "You left this at the house," he said. Inside was a folded note, old and yellowed. It was my handwriting from years ago, a grocery list, scribbled next to a reminder that said, "Buy new shoes for Simon." I smiled faintly. "I thought that was gone." "Looks like it followed you," he said, "like good intentions tend to." They both left before sunset, their goodbyes unhurried, the kind shared between people who know they'll see each other again in better seasons. I sat on the porch until the sky turned violet. Pie crumbs on a small plate beside me, the sound of waves rising with the tide. When the phone rang again, I almost didn't check it, but the number was familiar. Simon. I hesitated before answering. His voice was quiet. "Mom." "I'm here," I said. "I just wanted to tell you I started counseling," he said. "Debt management, too. I'm trying. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know." I closed my eyes, listening to the ocean between us. "That's good, Simon. I hope you keep trying." He was silent for a long moment. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss who you were," I replied softly. "And maybe, one day, I'll meet who you're becoming." Neither of us spoke again. The line went quiet, but not heavy, just human. After I hung up, I walked inside and opened the small drawer near the window. Inside lay the sneakers receipt, still folded neatly in its sleeve. I smiled and placed it back, not as evidence anymore, but as remembrance, a symbol of love given freely once upon a time. I walked back to the porch as the last of the sunlight faded. The ocean moved with a rhythm older than forgiveness. June's car lights disappeared down the road. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cried, a sound both lonely and alive. I whispered to the wind, "Forgiveness isn't owed. It's a season, and mine just ended." Then I sat down, the night air brushing softly against my skin. Below, the sea kept breathing, steady and endless, echoing the quiet pulse of something reborn. And as the waves rolled in, I said the words I had held for so long, not in anger, not in triumph, but in calm truth. They came back with a moving truck and found a new name on the deed. Mine. Again. The wind carried it away. The horizon glowed faintly one last time before folding into dusk. The sound of the ocean rose, full and forgiving, sealing the story with its endless rhythm. Peaceful, steady, and true.